My name is Yorke Rhodes from Microsoft, and in 2015 I actually had my personal journey of discovery in blockchain. Microsoft was a founding member of the Enterprise Theorem Alliance. We got together with a number of other enterprises and industry startups and essentially recognized that from an enterprise requirements perspective that if we were going to drive those priorities into Ethereum in a way that allowed all of these different vendors to interoperate, that we'd have to actually come up with a standard. Specifically, the Enterprise Theorem Alliance was founded because the focus, rightfully so, of the Ethereum Foundation was on public Ethereum. And it was therefore very hard to drive enterprise requirements into the specifications. So when we started it, that was the key objective. If you go back and you study Ethereum and the philosophy around Ethereum as a way of implementing digital uniqueness in an open public fashion that supports more than just a currency, that is a pretty compelling vision, in terms of the parallels that we see in other technology bases, whether it's the internet or databases or pretty much any technology. The concept of having a public version of that technology and a private or enterprise or intranet, depending on what your terminology is, version of that same technology is how you get adoption, right? So in the early days of the internet, at the protocol level, you had things like Novell and TCP/IP, and TCP/IP effectively won out in the early 90s. And that concept of sharing data in an open way over connected networks that didn't have to be specifically configured to connect with each other in a peer-to-peer way is what the internet is, right? And so if we look at the concept of blockchain and specifically Ethereum to do that same type of thing in a digitally unique way, supported by in the public space and incentivization mechanisms, that's pretty powerful. So looking at that same parallel around things like the internet, you can probably project that same journey where you say enterprises want to adopt this interesting new technology. They're first going to get comfortable with it inside of the enterprise, inside the intranet. But logically, it would make sense that if you're building applications there, that sort of turning a switch or adding some capability without rebuilding your entire stack and getting it to run in a public space leads you towards protocols that work in both. And so as one of the protocols that's been fairly widely adopted from an ecosystem perspective in the public space, and also fairly widely adopted from an early testing perspective in the enterprise space, that particular protocol actually has, I would say, a high probability of success as compared to a protocol that has no public version or a public version that has no private version. Picking protocols to work with that actually have equal capability in a public scenario and a private scenario, Ethereum is one of those, and the founding work that we did with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and the continued work that we're doing is really focused on how do we ensure that the public protocol called Ethereum works well in a private enterprise setting. So that's really what the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is all about. And the longer term goals there are that some of those capabilities, as we hone them from an enterprise perspective, could be driven back into public Ethereum specifications. At minimum, if I look at it from a software vendor perspective in the blockchain space, if I got a blockchain stack, my ideal scenario would be that same code base actually works equally well in a public blockchain scenario as it does in a private consortium blockchain scenario. From an investment and code maintenance perspective, it's going to be way simpler for me as a vendor if I can actually do that on one code base. The Theorem community is actually one of the most vibrant open source communities that I've seen, so we're extremely pleased to be working deeply in that community, and we work in other communities as well. From the perspective of desire to work towards a shared goal, it's very clearly demonstrated in this community.